Oh, now we're live. Okay, welcome back to Senate Education. I believe we have, let's see, Rob Fish and Christina Hultquist visiting with us again. There we are.
Hello, everybody.
How are you? Are you solo today, or is Christina also joining?
I believe Christine's in the waiting area, but she's not showing up as in the waiting area. So let me find out. She thinks she's in the waiting area. Sorry for the delay. I'm trying to find out what's happening here.
The irony isn't lost every time.
Someday we'll all get technology, right?
The other irony is that none of those reels of fiber have moved yet.
Right.
Out to the field.
There's snow on the ground there, and they have. I know that they are running fiber up in Calais already. So I don't know how much, but it has started.
All right.
Still trying to find out why Christine isn't here. Like, I know she plans to be here, and
well, we're happy to start with you, Rob, if you've got the info.
I do have the info. She's typing right now.
Why don't we get started, because we have only about 25 minutes, and
sure.
I want to try to stick to the schedule as closely as we can. So when we left off, there were some outstanding questions, and the two of you didn't have an opportunity to really. We were having some technological issues. Didn't have the opportunity to close the loop on some of this stuff. Our outstanding question, I think, in part continues to be: we need to make sure our schools and the homes of kids, have broadband. We need it in the schools for all sorts of teaching and course offerings that might not be there right now. And of course, we want it in homes so kids have the same opportunities, in the Kingdom as they do in Rutland as they do in Bennington, right across the board. So why don't you, with that, fill us in a little bit more from our last conversation?
Sure. Well, let me pull up some of the maps that we created that visually describe what the coverage level is in each of those areas. I shall say Christine is trying to get in, and it's saying she's still in the waiting room.
Okay.
But I'm gonna
see her here. When we see her, we will definitely let her in. In the meantime.
Sure. So I'm actually going to go to the presentation rather than try to go through the map. You've seen this before, just showing where the different districts are, and I'm going to land right here. So this is what we were working on when we met last week, of showing the breakdown in coverage in schools across the state. Right now,
Rob, we don't see anything on our screen. Are you trying to pull something up?
I was.
We also have them.
Do we have it? Is it one of these?
You have it. You have it there, and I have it now. Sorry.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Now you should be seeing it here. So.
Thank you.
So this is the breakdown, and I'll point you to the URL right here, the web address. There's an interactive map where you can get way more specific information about each school district and each school in the state. It also shows what districts where Wi-Fi hotspots were installed to provide some additional level of coverage for those areas that do not have access right now. So looking at the schools across the state, the majority of them, 68% of them, do have a fiber connection. Schools can access fiber that is not just for, there's fiber that's for residential, and there's fiber that's for business and consumer, and business and community anchors. They are able to access that fiber. For instance, the First Light fiber in the southern part of the state. So 68% of the schools are served at 100 by 100. Another 24% are served by cable connections, which are at least 100 by 20. But then there's still 7.5% that do not have access to a connection that under the NTIA definition would be considered broadband. So they have a connection less than 100 by 20, which is certainly inadequate for everything that a school needs to do. I see
Even
Christine
that-
has joined us.
100 even that 100 by 20, you can't, what can you really do with that if you're a school?
Well, that's the challenge. With 100 by
Yeah.
20, you're talking about 20 as the upload speed. When you're trying to connect to remote lessons or doing, God forbid we ever have to go back to doing remote schooling, that 20 is not going to be enough. It's not enough to allow students to access courses from another school or from another country even. So it's a big limitation, and every school at the state, frankly, should have a fiber connection, and that's our goal. So in terms of the number of schools, you can see that broken down in the bar graph here, and then the map. But I do point you to the URL where you can zoom in and see it a lot clearer.
So is some of this contingent, getting all the schools to 100 by 100, is it contingent upon the local CUDs? Is that kind of what's happening in part? If I've got schools in this state where kids don't have 100 by 100, is that who I talk to at this point?
At this point, that is helpful. As more middle mile is constructed, the schools and the anchor institutions may have access sooner than other residents in the area. But if you're in a district where fiber is going to be built out to the entire district, such as Southern Vermont, all of those schools will certainly have a fiber connection at this point when that is completed.
I mean, it looks like the problems really are in Southern Vermont between Bennington and Brattleboro, and then way up in the Northeast Kingdom and Island Pond area.
Yes, that is accurate, both in terms of access at the schools and by the larger population. On this slide right here, you see the heat map. The darker the color, the less the access. We've added the school district boundaries onto that. So the areas of the state that are in the worst shape in terms of students having access and the schools having access are in the Kingdom and in Windham County.
Please, Senator Williams.
My understanding of the reason the CUDs were created was so that once the fiber was run to the municipalities, the centers of the population, that they would keep pushing it out to the rural areas. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, except when it comes to the communication union districts, the unserved is their first priority. They're doing the opposite as what a for-profit business would do, where they build out to the densest, easiest, most profitable areas first. So the CUDs are created to reach those other areas. To reach those areas, they likely will have to go through those denser areas, but just it's a little bit upside down there. But the focus is on who does not have the best connection now.
Can you hear me at all? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I want to make a point too about that 100 by 100. We use that. We want to be careful that doesn't confuse people, because 100 by 100 is probably not adequate either.
Right.
It really is about the technology. Most schools, I would say almost all, need 1 gig, gigabit fiber. But we use that convention 100 by 100 fiber because that is the Act 71 definition. But it really is a technology. So, but you're on the right track. And I think, Rob, your next slide shows the fiber coverage. That ties in. Yeah.
Just to build off of that, if you have a 100 by 100 connection, you have a gig by a gigabit connection available.
Yeah. And
so
a 10 gig.
It's about the technology. But here, I'll go to the next slide here.
Rob, so I'm just thinking down in Windham County, do those areas that are very dark, do they have CUDs?
They do have a CUD. The vast
Okay,
majority
so
of the state is covered. Deerfield Valley or DV Fiber is the CUD down in that area. They have also started construction. I believe they connected a few customers to work out their systems in, I can't remember if it's Stamford or Whitingham. I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
Christine, do you want to take over?
Well, sure. You were doing great. But, so
Happy to help, but don't want to.
No, it's fine. So yeah, this is a slide we're talking about. The total addresses served, this gets the statewide addresses. As Rob introduced in the original, one of the earlier slides, about making sure all the students have the coverage they need. Again, this is really ties to, if it's not fiber, it's not broadband. And you can see that 70% of our addresses are not served by fiber, which is why the legislature, in your wisdom, set 100 by 100 as the goal. And within the COD boundaries is 22% of 8% outside. But that outside the COD boundaries doesn't mean we're not addressing them, because many of those are being addressed through towns that are working with private telecom providers. And Rob, maybe you can add to that, because you're more boots on the ground with it.
Yeah, I think it's great to note here that the dark area of EC fiber territory, where the entire territory is being built out with fiber, regardless of the density of the area, that they're serving the unserved first, is where they're going. So that's what we would expect the rest of the state to look like in a few years.
Yep, well said.
So, and it's useful to know that in terms of addresses that are not in a CUD, that's only 28% of the addresses. All of the other addresses that are not served by fiber are in a CUD.
Good.
Okay. And again, to remind you of this funding model, we're talking about connectivity, but we also want to talk about affordability, especially in these rural areas where the income stress is much higher than, the areas that are not served today. There's under a much heavier income stress than the areas that are served, which is why, we talk about connectivity, but we want to talk about affordability in the same mouthful, because it's important that we get as much grant funding as possible to drive down the monthly cost. So anyway, we're kind of hitting we want to make sure we kind of reviewed all this before in terms of the grant funding. We want to make sure we hit exactly what this committee asked for in terms of coverage. And, we can actually take you, Rob can actually take you to the ArcGIS site to show you more detail if you'd like. It's a question of where do you want to go as a committee?
So why don't you take us to the site just to kind of show us around a little bit, and we can always check things out on our own as well.
Yeah, I think the site it would be very helpful. So go ahead, Rob.
But I think, Christine, for us is, God forbid, another pandemic were to hit or COVID numbers go up in 2 years. We just want to make sure, as I know is the goal of everyone, that schools and families have, the access, or that things are moving along quickly and efficiently. And it sounds like things are. And in a couple of years, this map will look very different.
That's correct. And with this site, when you go to this site, you can drill down right down to your address to see your coverage, which is
yeah.
Wow. So and then you can see the schools and their coverage. So if you have any questions around, if you get questions from your constituents, of course you can always forward those to us. But if Rob's showing you, I don't know if you can see that, but you get down. He's got Addison Central School pulled up. And you get the actual broadband status of the school, how many the percentage is served, the percentage not served, served 100 by 100, which you can assume is fiber, 100 by 20. So you can see all that information. So when you get questions from your constituents, if you're so moved, this site will give you all the answers from a broadband standpoint.
Yeah. And it shows for the school and also for the district in terms of residents in that district.
Right. Yep. Well said.
And then if we get a question about timing, that we would likely forward to one of you, and you might be able to, give them a better sense of
yes.
time. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this? Yeah, please, Senator Woodman.
So are there any security concerns about this system? Can it be hacked? Can it be shut down?
Well, it's on a state system, so
Right.
you know, this, even if it was shut down, it wouldn't cause any damage. You know, so it's a low risk site from a standpoint because
I'm not, just to clarify, are you talking about the website that has this data or the internet access at the schools?
oh, good question, Rob.
All systems.
The whole system.
Yeah, thank you. That's you know, cybersecurity is a standard that is in our outside plant requirements as well as the federal requirements. That's a concern that we're ongoing. We're staying up with the best of technology in order to monitor attacks on the infrastructure. But you know, it's an important question. It's something that we're doing due diligence on. It's in our standards that it's on our grant requirements. It's in the federal requirements. You know, we are going to be using the best technologies, and part of the federal, by the way, to allay any fears that you may have if you've heard about technology like Huawei, that's been banned. Where this is, there's a domestic procurement requirement within these grants as well.
Senator Williams, Weeks has a question.
Yeah, just curiosity. So I understand the necessity of the program to get essentially broadband out to the schools as soon as possible. I'm curious though, if you've been commissioned to look at technology refreshment over time and what that cost is and feeding that back to legislature for long-range planning.
Oh, thank you. That's a really good question. First of all, I will say, let's start with the base technology of fiber optic itself. You know, fiber optic is, you know, just to give you an example, one fiber optic the size of a human hair can carry 3,000 times the amount of data as cable. We build this network with 144, minimum 144 fibers in the backbone. So you got tremendous capacity for upside. There's no known technology that beats the speed of light right now. So, you know, fiber optic, in the electric utility business, we were still using fiber from the 70s. It's got all, you know, it's really, you can continue to get increased densities with fiber by how you split the light. So from the base technology standpoint, it's good. Now, also related, I believe related to your question is, what's the upgradability of the system? The networks are using what's called a GPON network. And GPON networks are upgradable, you know, from 10 gig to 100 gig. So ultimately, these are all upgradable. You don't change the fiber, you change the electronics on each end. So as the demands increase, this technology is continually upgradable. Does that answer your question?
Yes and yes. I am curious though, you know, at 5 years, 10 years down the road, you know, the ability, the technology to move more through the same pipe, you know, that it's so, you know, that there's an awareness in the legislature about that this is not essentially one and done, that there is a refreshment cost over time.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe that is just like at your house, if you have a Wi-Fi router, occasionally you have to update it to be able to use all the speeds that the network is capable of bringing into the house. That would be the same thing for the schools, but the network itself, the amount of speed is limitless that it can provide, and it's going to be providing this for the next 30 to 40 years. We like to say it's future-proof, and that's why we're focusing on this investment now. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity we have as the state. We want to build infrastructure that's going to last us through the lifetime.
Yeah, and the electronics, by the way, kind of a rule of thumb is you need to upgrade your electronics on the ends, you know, every 10 years. And if you look at the percentage of cost of the electronics versus the entire network, you know, it's probably about, you know, 5 or 10%. But that's built into the business plans. The business plans have that built into it, and it's also, you know, it's easily said. I was going to get into federal depreciation stuff, but that's probably not necessary.
Thank you.
Following up on Senator Williams' question about security, so we follow, does every state basically follow some federal guidelines around cybersecurity?
Yes, yes, there are national standards set for cybersecurity.
That we have to do certain things, okay?
Yeah.
Just curious, thank you. Any
And
other questions?
some of that cybersecurity is also on the end user as well in terms of setting up firewalls. So it's a shared responsibility. The network operator is taking on some of it, but just like at home where you have antivirus software on your computer, it's the same thing whether it's a personal computer or a school network. So the responsibility is somewhat shared.
Yeah, but I think you ask a really important question here because, you know, I was a subject matter expert for the Department of Energy as cybersecurity from 2011 or 2013, so it's a little dated, but I suspect things are still the same. Most of the security breaches are caused by humans, not following process. So, protocols in the schools are actually very important. If you think about, some of the big security risks that have happened, they've become, people bring them in on their USB disks and contaminate the system. Typically, it doesn't come through the firewalls of the schools. So I think you brought up a good issue, and we will take that back in terms of providing, I think we have an obligation to provide advice to the schools on best practices in cybersecurity from a human standpoint.
And then somewhat related, do we have any, I don't know if you're the right folks to ask this, but how do we make sure our students are protected from, people that want to do harm to them?
Yeah.
Are there things that we as a state can make sure or require every school to have? I mean, what happens, after school is one thing, but while they're in our schools, how do we make sure as it relates to cyber, stuff, whether it's bullying, kidnapping, I mean, all sorts of things. How do we try to protect those kids?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that you're asking a very important question, and we need to build that into our plans. We actually have we've been funded we have a $518,000 grant to focus on digital equity and digital literacy. We're working on building a plan for digital literacy training. I think you should bring us back in next year and talk about what we're doing on that.
Yeah, that type of training is incredibly important.
Yep.
When I first started working on these issues, I was in a small village in Ghana that didn't have phone service until the year before. Now they had high-speed internet, and helping the community understand what's appropriate online, what's not appropriate, what to look out for. That person who says they're going to get you a green card probably isn't. All of those types of things are more of it's an education issue that should be within the classroom and within the community to build that digital literacy.
Yep, and we've been assigned that task as well from a
my thing is, if a little kid though gets some text that says, "Meet me outside."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, how do you make sure that stuff, doesn't happen? Yeah. Senator Weeks.
So it appears that the solution for the broadband access for schools is almost entirely broadband fiber-based for broadband. I was just wondering if in the process of developing this system, that if there was a need for an evaluation between fiber versus satellite access. Just curious if that was part of the question at the time, and if there was any benefit, again, maybe even this is outside of education, but for the larger community, if satellite was an option considered at any point.
Yes, actually, that's an important value. In fact, I'm speaking to you over a bonded network that includes Starlink. Starlink is better than nothing, but it's inadequate for your long-term needs. One of the things that, there's this, if you really get curious and you really want to get, you can Google Shannon's rule for broadband. When you're using radio frequency to communicate these satellites. That's what they have to use. There's limited bandwidth. So a year, I've been running this satellite for 20 months right now. When we started out, I was getting 300 megabits down, 100 megabits up. Today, it's 30 megabits down, 6 megabits up, because satellite faces the same challenges of all other technology except for fiber. So when I say that if it's not fiber, it's not broadband, we've researched that thoroughly. And there's tremendous agreement nationally within the Straight Broadband Leaders Network on this.
I also just want to add that this was evaluated over many, many meetings and many, many weeks when Act 71, the legislation that created the Vermont
Oh, good point, Ron.
Grant programs, and they came to the same conclusion that when it comes to broadband, it needs to be symmetrical. Fiber is the only thing that can do that at this point, because unlike the other technologies, it doesn't matter how many users are using it. When you're on a wireless connection or DSL connection and it reaches capacity speed, slow for everybody. That's not what you're going to find with fiber. So it was unanimous. I think there was one vote against the legislation that came up in 2020.
And you should know that now Starlink has a data cap.
Yeah, and that's the other issue. A lot of these technologies do have data caps. So what if a student is participating in an online course and halfway through the month of lessons, they reach their data cap and can't access video anymore?
Yeah.
So in order to protect students' access and really everybody's access, the data caps are not acceptable, and the throughput that fiber allows is the only thing that can achieve that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hallquist, Mr. Fish, thank you both very much. This has been very helpful, and appreciate the link, the time, and everything that you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for all the work you're doing. We definitely want to thank the legislation for well thought out legislation on this.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and feel free to reach out to us personally at any time if you have questions about your district